Right, welcome everybody to our event celebrating with Pride, part of our History Month's events. And thank you very much for joining us. We're doing this in podcast version, the first time that we've done it. We're quite excited about it, so we can bring it to lots and lots of people to listen to from the comfort of their own homes and their commute or something like this. It gives me great pleasure to host this conversation today. My name is James Waldron. I'm a GP, very much a portfolio GP in education. I work as an associate with the Training Hub, amongst a variety of other things. We've got an absolutely wonderful panel today to speak to you all about this really interesting topic about pride, and particularly about LGBTQIA plus topics. And we're going to explore that over the next hour or so. So that's really great. So without further ado, I'll introduce our panel. To start off with, we have Robbie Naylor, who is the head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at the ICB. We're very happy to welcome him. Hi, Robbie.
Hey, James. Yeah, really good to be here this evening.
Brilliant. We've also got Beckie McConville, who is a paediatric nurse, a health visitor, and she's been working in population health management, and she's the head of system EDI.
Hi, James. Yeah, lovely to be here this evening. Thank you.
Excellent. We've got Laurence Quirk, who's the program manager at the Training Hub.
Evening, James. Good to be here.
Hello there. And we've got Dr. Errum Mumtaz, who's a GP, a portfolio GP, and primary care education lead at the Training Hub.
Evening, James. Lovely to be here.
Hi. And then finally, Dr. Andy Foster, who is a GP partner in Bulwell, board director at the NCGPA, and the deputy inequalities lead at the place-based partnership. Hi, Andy.
Yeah, hi everyone. Lovely to be here. Nice to join you all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us. So I think, let's get started with the conversation. We're here to sort of celebrate and explore the idea of communities. In fact, so LGBTQIA, we use that and we see that term used quite a lot. But it sort of struck me that the word communities is an interesting one. You know, we're talking about a community of people. First thing I'd probably ask you, and I think I might come to you first, Robbie. What does community mean to you, particularly in this context?
Yeah, so thanks, James. I think community is one of those words that we use, and it's obviously a singular thing. I think within the broader context of the LGBTQIA plus community as a whole, there are loads of different communities within that. It's massively diverse as a whole community. So to me, community in the context of the LGBTQIA plus community is that coming together of the diversity and the brilliant expanse that is the variety of orientation and identity that makes up that broader bit, and us standing together and being part of one, whilst also having our own individual identities that we bring to that wider meaning of what community is.
That's a really lovely answer. I think this idea of identity and it being very, very personal really speaks to me. The fact is, when we talk about community, we talk about it. It's almost a bit easier for people outside that to talk about LGBTQIA. Whereas in reality, the experiences of people within that are going to be enormously different. And even within, I suppose, sub-communities, experiences are going to be very different. Does that ring true with other people in our family, in our panel? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it does, James. I think for me, I mean, my background's in community work, so not the NHS, but community work. You talk about community of place or community of interest or community of identity. And I think Robbie's touched on it, that there is a sense of different identities within the LGBTQI arena. But I think there's lots of intersectionality as well that we have to be aware of at the same time. So a number of people that I particularly personally follow on Instagram, for example, are disabled and gay or disabled and queer. And that's something that I think often gets forgotten about. In the same vein that I think the intersectionality around race or BME background and being from the LGBTQ plus community is often, again, sort of ignored. But again, I think there's the whole identity of, years ago you used to talk about the scene, where you met people, you know, the bars and the pubs and the clubs, etc. That doesn't seem to exist in the same way anymore. And there are lots of other outlets for people, whether it's online. And I think that's where you get the nuances of community as well these days. You get so much more in that online world where people do interact and are able to sort of be themselves much more so than they are perhaps in the workplace or in their own personal lives, in families and friends.
Yeah, certainly online communities have allowed people to sort of develop that. And, you know, as we know, on the online space can be an amazing force for good, but also can be the place where problems and discord can start. I look to you, Andy, as sort of our resident tech expert. Have you any thought about the discourse and the discussion online and how it sort of contributed to our exceptions of expectations of communities?
You know, that's a really interesting question. And you know, the first thing I was wanting to say was I feel like a real novice here in a way, because you know, I'm amongst people who are used to working in the, you know, equality, diversity, inclusion space, and I'm really just a normal person, really. You know, I work in general practice. I'm a GP, but I don't operate in that space. So I just wanted to really qualify anything I say from this point going forward. You know, I feel like I'm just, you know, man off the street, you know, in this kind of discussion. We were talking about communities, weren't we? And I think the important emphasis is in the S, really, because I think whilst to people outside who are maybe, you know, cisgendered and have more mainstream sexualities, I think okay, that's, you know, that's the LGBTQIA you know, community. But I think when you're within that, actually, and probably when you're without it as well, you appreciate actually there's lots of different groups of people within that, lots of different sub communities, and I was thinking, actually, why do we group all those things together? And I guess it's because there's a shared experience of being different in that area of either sexuality or gender identity or both, and maybe facing common struggles and maybe things that gay men and lesbian women might have been struggling with a few years ago and made progress with. You know, maybe some of the newer, you know, some of the more newly kind of recognized or talked about identities are now facing, you know, now really. And, you know, so I think that there's kind of that utility in that group being put together because of that shared experience. So that was my thoughts on communities. Yeah, interesting point we were beginning to make about things moving online, because I remember when I was a younger man, you know, and when I was at university, it was all about going out. You know, we only had phones that did text messages, you know, that was all they did, and it was all about going out to a nightclub, you know, NG1 or, you know, places like that in Nottingham, which is where we're filming, and that's how you met people. And it felt to me like it was easier for there to be something that felt like a real community to me then. It feels different now. You know, there are communities that happen online, but there isn't really that big mixing pot of the nightclub. It's not a particularly techie answer, James. It feels very different. I mean, there's all sorts of apps and you know, ways people communicate now, but in some ways those sort of divide and isolate people in a way.
I think that's a really interesting point, in the fact of, you know, feeling that there may be some division and isolation, and actually that, you know, you lose that kind of interpersonal, real life, face-to-face connection. And of course, COVID hasn't really helped with that, I'm sure. I wonder though, I mean, to me it feels like actually there is an opportunity for amplification of voice, for, you know, for being able to show parts of a community that you can contribute to, if that, even in a small way. Before you might have had to do that in a much more significant and overt way, but actually now you can show allyship, I suppose, or a contribution to these causes, just, you know, by social media, by the things that you do, and I suppose the way that you hold yourself. Does that sound like does that ring true, or would you challenge that?
Oh, I don't know.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, I see some nods from some of our other panelists. Beckie, do you have anything that you might want to?
Yeah, I think for me, I am not part of that community, but I suppose I've appreciated in my new role how I made a lot of assumptions, and we talk about lots of language that we are expected to know about but we may not, and there's an assumption in society that we all understand that language. So I think for me it was important to really listen. As a nurse, I think personalisation, appreciating people's uniqueness, irrelevant of all of those issues, was particularly important to me. So I suppose it's really opened my eyes to, can I be a voice for all sorts of people within this community without having to be a part of it, but really opening myself to listening and learning about what's important to people and what I can do to advocate and be an ally. So that was my biggest learning.
Yeah, I think it makes it eminently available via the internet.
We'll touch more on the subject of community in later episodes. Over the course of this Celebrating Pride podcast, we will chunk up the event into smaller episodes. In the next episode, we will discuss terminology used and what that means to different people. For now, goodbye, and we'll see you in the next one.